Tuesday morning. Just some thoughts on cold weather. It doesn't get terrible cold here where I live right now in Fallon, Nevada. It'll darn sure get uncomfortable, but it doesn't get ridiculously cold like it does other places. But I have spent a lot of time in places that it does get darn sure cold. And so I just was kind of chilly this morning. Got me to thinking about some of the little cold weather tricks that I've learned over the years, and that I think some people either know but don't really think it all the way through, which is pretty common in the horse industry for sure. I suppose in every industry. Either know but don't think it all the way through, or maybe just don't know because I hadn't thought of it. It's one of those deals that common sense isn't always all that common. But so the first thing I was thinking is, I think it's common knowledge that these horses in the cold weather need to eat more, and the action of their stomach digesting food is their built-in heater, and horses, they can withstand extremely cold temperatures as long as they've got a little bite to eat. And I do think people tend to forget that, a horse in its most natural setting are from the steppe regions of the world. The open plains and prairies where there's not any trees hardly for a windbreak, and where it gets darn sure cold, but generally in places where the snow doesn't stay on the ground very much on account of the wind. So they're a cold weather animal. They're built for cold weather. Several of the first attempts to go to the South Pole, they used ponies, just because that was, the best cold weather beast of burden there was to offer. So anyway, they need to eat more when it's cold to keep themselves warm, but I think that's where some people forget about the fact that they need to eat more. It's the act of eating that they need to be doing. They don't need more nutrition necessarily than they do at any other time. And the fact of the matter is, for the most part, when it's real cold like that, they're not getting ridden and exercised as much. So they actually don't need more nutrition as much as they probably need less nutrition, but just more to eat. So it's important that they have something like some just low quality grass, just some browse. It can even be straw, but just something to munch on to keep that heater going in their belly. It's real easy to just say, oh, it's cold, and feed them double. Well, if you're feeding really good alfalfa like I feeding them double isn't that's not necessarily real healthy for them. So it's something to think about, that when that cold weather hits, have some cold weather feed, have their regular nutrition as well. but have some cold weather feed too. And in the cold weather, things like grains and supplements don't really do much anything. I mean, any more in the cold than they do in the warmer weather, in the sense that another scoop of grain isn't going to keep them warm all night, because of the way their body digests grains. However, a big flake of just plain old grass, even if it's a rather low nutrition grass, that's something that's going to keep them warm all night. So there's one of the things I was thinking about in the cold. Another thing is bits. It's not currently where I'm standing right here. It's not below freezing, but I'm gonna do it anyway. When it's real cold, I don't like to ride in a bit if I can get away with it. Any bit at all if I can get away with it, and darn sure not a bridle, a big California style bridle. I try to ride anything I can in a hackamore when it's cold, and then if it's below freezing, I'm tied hard and fast to that rule, and that's because when we have a bit, we're really looking towards a lot of salivation in their mouth, and if it's freezing cold and they're salivating, it'll freeze that saliva and burn their lips and burn their tongue and really make things uncomfortable for them. And anytime you make that bit something uncomfortable, you lose some of the good in it. So, like I said, I'm tied hard and fast to that rule. If it's below freezing, if it's above freezing, I just prefer to use a hackamore. Some of the other things a guy needs to think about in that cold weather, whatever your protocol is on their feed every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks or whatever like that, you don't need to do it near as much. Their feet don't grow near as much when it's cold. That's because all the energy that their body uses to grow their feet, they're using in the wintertime to grow hair and to keep warm. That's why if you'll notice, when it comes to spring thaw and they start to shed their coat, all of a sudden it went from horses probably due for a trimming. The next day or so, you go, holy smokes, that son of a gun is long, because once they go to trying to shed that hair and they don't need all that energy to stay warm, they have to dump that nutrition somewhere, and so their body dumps it into their feet and they grow a lot of foot. But in the wintertime, you can change. If you're on a 6-week program, you can change it to an 8 or 10 week program. If you're on an 8 or 10 week program, you can change it to a 10, 12 week program. And use your judgment, keep an eye on them, but there's no sense in having their feet done when they don't need it. Just because it's on your calendar, they don't grow as much foot in the winter. There's the ever going battle of the minds about when and where a blanket is appropriate. I don't know. That's a argument that you're not ever going to win. If you're somebody that thinks they need a blanket, nobody's ever going to convince you that they don't. And if you're somebody that doesn't think they need blankets, it's pretty hard to convince somebody like that they do. Personally, if everything is as it should be, in the sense that they have been allowed to acclimate correctly and haven't been kept in under lights and things like that, then I let nature do what it's supposed to do. As long as they can get in some place where it's dry, which they never do, but I just feel better if they have the opportunity to get someplace to get dry, and they can take care of themselves in terms of being warm. If you've got them under lights and been keeping a blanket on them to keep their coat laying flat because you're showing in the winter or something like that, yeah, well then you can't just throw them to the wolves and not let them have that blanket. But all things being equal, I don't really worry about those blankets. And you know, the exception being if it's two geldings squealing like a couple of little kids. The exception being if the horse is coming out of South Florida and I'm moving him to Bismarck, South Dakota, or North Dakota. I don't remember if Bismark's in North Dakota. Anyway, makes no difference. I'll pick a place I actually know. Helena, Montana. There we go. If you're moving him from Okeechobee, Florida to Helena, Montana in January, yeah, the son of a gun probably needs a blanket. But there's probably a whole lot of other issues that horse is going to have too. So those are things to think about. That's what got me started on this whole thing about the cold weather is so one of these horses I'm riding, I've had some problems with his feet anyway. Just he didn't have real healthy feet when he got to me, and we fought off some, and so of course it cripples him, and so first thing I do when I get here in the morning is pick his feet out, and then he's fine. If I were to leave that for a few days, it would bruise his soles to the point where he really would be sore. But you'll find if you're in any snowy country at all, you'll find that happens a lot. You'll see these horses with their hoof packed full of snow, especially if they've got shoes on and are having their feet taken care of. Hey! Sorry, I had to yell at a puppy. Hey, you come here. He started to think that staring at horses until they put their nose at him and then nipping them on the nose is a fun game, so I'm going to have to tie him up here in a second. Anyway, if you're in that snowy country, it'll really pack their feet up full of snow, and they'll darn sure get sore. In my opinion, if they're outside and in the snow and you're not using them, take those shoes off and rasp their foot flat, then you won't have a problem. But if you do need to have them shod, then you dang sure need to make sure you get out there and come here, get out there and pick their feet pretty regular. It makes them real sore. I'm going to tie you up because you're being bad, but your partner here, he's being good. So I'm not going to tie him up. And you're a dog, so it's not like you're going to be laying here thinking, oh, if only I was good, I wouldn't be tied up. It's not how it works. But I'm doing it that way anyway. And when we do that, we really can cause a lot of trouble for ourselves. Because humans are very, very complicated animals. And almost everything else is not. So anthropomorphism. I first heard that term my friend Duck. And it's funny that you should have a friend with the nickname Duck, but I've met in my life 5 or 6 guys with the nickname Duck, so maybe it's not that odd. Anyway, my friend Duck said to me one day that I don't anthropomorphize things. And then after he explained to me what that word meant, I said, well, that's easy. It's because I don't talk like a human either. Or don't think like a human either. We kind of had a good laugh over that. But let's talk about in our horsemanship, kind of the pros and cons of doing that, because it's a lot of people do it. So one of my I guess you'd say greatest or most influential mentors, he has a tendency to do this, to anthropomorphize his horses and his dogs and just pick up everything else. And I think the biggest reason he does that is because he's very uneducated. And mind you, I said uneducated. I didn't say that he's not smart. He's one of the smartest humans I've ever met, but he's not very educated. And so that's about the only way he can explain a thing, is by making it into a human thing. And for a time that made it pretty difficult for me to learn from him, but I figured him out. And you'll find that people like him that have spent, don't run me over, that have spent so much time around a certain animal, in this case a horse, that they maybe do think more like a horse than they do like a person. That horses have been so influential in their life that they do kind of think like a horse. But when he watches what a horse is doing and he tries to figure out why, he has to put himself in that horse's shoes and think of why he would do that thing. Well, there again, that causes some problems. We perceive the world differently, we see differently, we hear differently. We have different wants and needs. And so it's pretty easy to be misguided there. Now, that's not always the worst thing in the world. I mean, in the sense that sometimes it doesn't matter. You know, if you decided a horse did this, that, or the other through anthropomorphism, it's very likely to be benign, whether you're right about why they do that or not. So it's not the end of the world, but it's something to think about, is that we perceive the world entirely differently than they do. So trying to understand what they do and why, based on our own observations and our own perception and our own personal feelings, chances are we're wrong. Now, there's some people that teach this way. Some of the big time clinicians teach this way, and I'm not saying it's wrong, because there's times, and I've found in my limited experience doing clinics, that sometimes that's the only way you can really get somebody to understand, is to compare horses and humans. And that's comparing apples and oranges, but like he says in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, in the end we're all fruit. So it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, and especially when you're deciding on happy little things, then it's really not a big deal. And then when you're deciding on other things, like I do this exercise until he starts paying attention. Well, that's not really a thing. It's a horse is always paying attention. That's sort of like, sometimes when the kids are doing school, my wife will make them jump up and do jumping jacks or run laps or something, because they're having a hard time. Is that it can get dangerous and be counterproductive whenever it comes to the horse not behaving correctly. When it's happy little stuff, or if it's just a fun little play buck or something like that, it's not the end of the world if we talk about, well, oh, he's just feeling good, getting the cobs out or whatever, but when the horse is misbehaving or is doing something contrary or isn't learning a concept and executing a maneuver the way we think they should, and we anthropomorphize it, being ill for the sake of being ill, like we do, because they don't do that. And it's tough on them, it's tough on us, it's detrimental to our training. And the thing of it is, while I said that the two versions don't hurt at all, and the one does, is that unless you're real careful, if you do the two harmless versions of anthropomorphizing, you'll find yourself also doing the harmful one. It's hard to separate these things in our mind. Once we start giving them these personalities and talking to them and doing silly harmless stuff about who they are and what they are and how they act, once we're already in that frame of mind, then it's really, really easy to decide that this horse won't pick up the lope just because he's trying to mess with me, which like I say, doesn't make any sense. That a horse, even if a horse did make that decision one day that I'm just gonna jack with Brett, well, once I start putting the pressure on, he's gonna change his mind. And so in times like that, I've got to not think that he's doing ill to me for the sake of being ill. I've got to think about the fact that there's a reason this horse won't pick up this lead. Is it because he doesn't know how? I know, he knew how last week. Okay. Was it because he hurts? Well, let's find out. What could possibly hurt? And then we have to start going through the checklist of things to try to figure out why this isn't working. With me riding lots and lots of these young horses, sometimes it's because, well, he grew a little bit over the weekend, and so he feels out of balance. It doesn't feel comfortable for him. No, keep going. No, keep going. So the horse feels out of balance and doesn't feel comfortable picking up that lead. Okay, well, that means I don't have to add the pressure. I don't have to kick harder. What I need to do is do some exercises that help him find that balance a little better. Getting mad and kicking harder isn't going to make him more confident about his new balance. It's going to make him less confident about his new balance. So I guess the whole point of all this is that it's harmless and it's fun to give them their personalities and to talk about them, talk for them, and Tom Hagwood and I used to make up what this horse would be like if he was a human. This horse, he'd be a Wall Street executive, and this horse, he'd be kind of a Kid Rock character living in a trailer house with a wife beater on and stuff like that. And it's fun and harmless. But like a lot of other things in this world that are fun and harmless, if you get to doing it, it'll lead to things that aren't fun and aren't harmless. So just be careful with it. It's real easy to decide that a certain filly's just bitchy, when in fact it's not that she's bitchy. She's scared, unconfident, it's real easy to decide that another horse is really pensive and quiet when in fact he's sore. It's real easy to decide another one's a jerk, you know, when the truth of the matter is he's got an ulcer. So watch out for that. Ooh.